What can a human do versus what should an AI do? That's the first part of the formula. The second part is, what can an AI do to enhance the human's ability to do their job even better? So that's the simple formula that I look at. And so as an organization, if you go in and say, okay, let's just think about it very simply in this format. Let's not get caught up in the noise that's around the industry, around the consumer, around fears, around all that. Let's just focus in on the signal of what we can do to make that experience better for our customer and for the agent themselves. And then we answer those questions, then I think we're going to have a successful, empathetic AI solution.
That was Jonathan Shroyer, Chief CX Innovation Officer at Arise Virtual Solutions. And he's a thought leader who has been reshaping the way companies and leaders think and operate over the last 2 decades. He's been recognized by the CIO Journal as one of the top CX professionals, and I've invited him on the podcast to offer critical insights on a leader's biggest priorities in today's fast-paced, tech-influenced environment, as well as the balance between technology and human-centered customer experiences. And over the course of our conversation, we're going to cover a wide range of thought-provoking topics, from the role of AI in transforming the customer experience industry to the ethical considerations that come with such innovation. But what really, truly stands out in Jonathan's philosophy is his focus on the human elements that enable or disable leadership: psychological safety, genuine communication, empathy, and so much more. So whether you're a C-suite executive, a mid-level manager, or someone just aspiring to lead in this digital age, this episode is packed with some invaluable perspectives that you cannot afford to miss. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to San Francisco, where Jonathan is waiting to speak with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
No, thanks, Neil. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. So I'm Jonathan Shroyer. I'm the Chief CX Officer, an MD of gaming at Arise. And I've kind of been in the services industry for, I guess it's 21 years now. I started off as an agent on the phones for Microsoft back in 99. And now I lead the gaming division for Arise. I started Officium Labs, a gaming services company that I sold to Arise most recently. So it's exciting to be on the show to talk about all the different topics around AI, CX, and everything in all between.
Fantastic. Well, it's a huge honor to have you on the show with me today. And one of the things I always try to talk about, we'll talk about all those cool things about AI and technology, etc., but also the very human aspect of the impacts that technology has on our lives and our work as well. And one of the things that attracted me to you is that you emphasize the importance of psychological safety in team dynamics. So can you share possibly a real-world example or case study where fostering psychological safety in the tech industry or in the workplace led to tangible improvements in something like, let's say, customer experience?
Well, I mean, I think there's a way to do it, and then there's a way not to do psychological safety. So I was in a meeting earlier in my career, and there were like 5 or 6 people in the meeting, we'll say director and above. And the GM came in, and the first thing that he decided to do was just to rail the team and make them feel small. And so what ended up happening was everybody in the team after that was afraid to speak their truths, afraid to explain themselves in a way that was authentic and that would have been most productive for the meeting and the topic of conversation. And so I think when you go into a meeting and you lay down this gauntlet of fear, then what you're going to get back is people are going to recede. But I went to a different meeting, different leader, similar topic, and he came in and said, "Hey, thanks everyone for joining the meeting. Really appreciate it. These are some of the things that I'm seeing and that I'm hearing, but you guys and gals are on the front lines. You know what's going on. I'd love to go around the table and hear everyone's viewpoints and thoughts. But what I'd like to get out of this meeting are these 2 or 3 things. Does anybody else want to get anything else out of this meeting? And then finalize and say, okay, let's proceed." Now that that different tone and that different approach, people open up. They're authentic. They feel like they're not, if they say something that somebody isn't going to like, they're not going to get browbeat, for it, right? And so I think those are two different approaches. The first approach is really unnecessary, regardless of how frustrated you are as a leader, regardless of, how important or stressful the topic is. I think you always have to remember people do business with people. They don't do business with numbers, with shareholders, with stakeholders, the board. They do business with each other. And so I think it's so important to create that psychological safety so that they can be themselves, because that's when you're really going to find the magic of what makes a company be most successful.
100%. And I love the two different scenarios there, those different approaches. And empathy is obviously a big part of the second one that you provided there. And also in the tech industry, AI and empathy is an increasingly big topic. And as AI becomes an integral part of CX, how can organizations, do you think, ensure that the emotional and empathetic aspect of customer service doesn't get lost? And are there any strategies that you'd employ at Arise Virtual Solutions that maybe bring that to life a little as well?
But I think that it's interesting of late. I think obviously I've been working in AI and CX for the better part of a decade. I think of late there's been a lot of consumer publicity about AI. And so then everyone is not like, oh, I need to jump on this bandwagon and figure out AI and all that kind of stuff. I think when you think about how AI and CX should dovetail together in the most effective way, I have a very simple formula that I look at. And I look at it from a perspective of how does AI enhance the customer experience? And when I say enhance, there's 2 or 3 different ways that it can enhance it. There's one where it can enhance and empower what the agent or the support professional can do for, the customer. So in other words, it can pull information faster. It can write scripts for them. It can write customized responses. It can do a lot of different things faster for the customer support professional. And then that enables the customer support professional to be really focused in on the second thing, which is what's that communication that I'm sending back, especially if it's in written format. Because, oftentimes written format can be so misinterpreted. So how am I being intentional in really sending that message back as if I'm a human talking to a human, rather than trying to finish this really fast because I have to get 6 of these done an hour, right? And so you get in that second piece where the human can actually engage the human based off of that information that the AI engine has provided them. And then I think the third one, which enables the human to be really focused, is let's not have the human do repetitive, non-value tasks. And so if you need to change a password, if you need to, look a query up and do this, if you need to, re-authenticate your wallet, whatever it is, right? A computer can do that. You don't need a human to do that. So let's really focus formula is like, what can a human do versus what should an AI do? That's the first part of the formula. The second part is what can an AI do to enhance the human's ability to do their job even better? So that's the simple formula that I look at. And so as an organization, if you go in and say, okay, let's just think about it very simply in this format. Let's not get caught up in the noise that's around the industry, around the consumer, around fears, around all that. Let's just focus in on the signal of what we can do to make that experience better for our customer and for the agent themselves. And then we answer those questions, then I think we're going to have a successful, empathetic AI solution.
Love that. And of course, another big area is the role of communication and the impact in translating into better customer experiences too. So are there any insights you might be able to share on how that principle has been operationalized within your own organization? Because I think it's an ideal destination that a lot of business leaders want to get to, but getting there is a lot more challenging than it sounds very often.
Well, I mean, what I think is super interesting. So I'm in the gaming space, and what I love about gaming is you have these players. Let's say there's 1 million players playing a game, right? You have these players, and they're all different players. Like they are playing this game for a specific reason. And sometimes you can segment players into personas, but still it doesn't fully represent the player. But what I love about AI is now with our AI solution, I can plug the AI into how they're playing the game, what motivates them, what excites them, what interests them, what lore they're most engaging with in the game. And then now you can have the AI build a fully customized response for them and them only that wouldn't be related to anybody else in the game on their particular issues. So then you're in this situation where you're like, oh, wow, they know who I am as an individual, as a player. And then you have the human refine it, enhance it, and so forth and so on. But what people won't realize is actually the power of that is the AI taking all of that data and creating a customized response so you feel like you're the only player in the game. And I think in that, it's not only going to be the game, it's going to be products and, other things outside of gaming, where that's really the power of it, where you can customize it in a way that you can never customize it with just a human solution to it.
Wow, incredibly powerful, especially in this rapidly changing technological landscape. And as a rule, for any business leader listening to our conversation today, is there any advice you'd give them on how they should be adapting their style and indeed their priorities to ensure that they're not only keeping up, but also driving innovation in that customer experience? Because there's a great line, I think it was IBM about 10 years ago, said, the last great experience that you have becomes the standard expectation for every future experience. So any advice you can offer there around driving innovation?
Well, I wrote a book a couple of years ago, I specifically love one of the chapters in the book, and it talks about the CX lab that I have in San Francisco. And in the book, I talk about, well, how do you set up innovation in the lab? And I think people expected me to, give them a framework for innovation. And I said, innovation doesn't happen inside structure. I said that's not the way that it works. I mean, we want the structure in place because then we feel like we get outcomes. But when you are already setting the outcome, then you're not innovating. And so what I always say is, what's the simple question that's going to lead to the next generation of innovation? And so when we started Officium Labs, I had one simple question. So this is back in 2019. I had one simple question, which was, how do we demonstrate to gaming CX leaders that customer service or player support, as it's called in gaming, is a revenue generator for them? That was a simple question. And then once we asked that simple question, then the team spent 2 or 3 days in the lab brainstorming, like, how would you answer that question? Now, the answer becomes complex, right? But the question doesn't have to be complex. You don't have to have this complex framework. So once you have that simple question, or 2 or 3 simple questions that you want to ask, then you go in and like, well, how do we make that happen? And what you'll find out is there's something you can do right now. There's some things that you can do right now because the technology or the investment isn't there, or the innovation, something hasn't been invented yet. Something needs to be invented for you to do it. You're not the inventor. You're like, I need that for my thing. Or the third thing is it helps people rethink their overall customer experience. Because I think what you kind of alluded to, in a different way, you're talking about expectation, but I think the other side of that coin is that everybody in the CX organization determines that that's now the way that we deliver service. And then they forget to innovate because they're busy. There's tight, budgets are tight. Usually you only get 1 to 3% of your gross revenue invested in service, right? So it's not like you have an innovation engine inside of service. Most companies don't. And so then you get stuck. I get the service level. I hit CSAT. I'm worried about NPS. I'm worried about stickiness. I'm worried about, you get worried about all of these really important operational metrics. That type of a mindset doesn't work with simple questions, right? And so either you have to break yourself out of that mindset and go to a lab to be able to do that, or you have to put a team in a trusted ring-fenced area that their only job, even if it's 1 or 2 people, their only job is to think about those questions or those answers and then help you build the future of innovation without getting mired into operations. Because the minute that you get them mired into operations, I always say operations is where innovation goes to die. And so you just have to be very thoughtful about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And I think something else that we've all witnessed over the last 5-10 years, or possibly even longer, is moving fast and breaking things is not always the answer. And we've seen a lot of the harm and damage from certain social media algorithms. And I think this time around, it almost feels like the stakes are a little higher. And as AI transforms the CX industry, are there any ethical considerations that companies need to be mindful of before just almost being like little children playing with complex toys without realizing the dangers behind them? And is this something that you're addressing too?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. So if you think about the shipbuilding process, when you're first building a ship to sail on the ocean, the lake, wherever, you can move fast and you can break things because you can quickly repair those things or adjust those things because it's a small ship. As the ship gets larger, if you try to move fast and break things, you may accidentally become the Titanic. And so I think you have to be thoughtful about, as you get larger or your customer base gets larger, where you protect things and then where you allow, rapid innovation to occur. And I think you got to be really thoughtful about that. And I think from your perspective and what you're talking about with ethical compliance, security, those types of things, I think it's really important that standards are put in place to ensure that large companies that have big ships are protecting their most valuable asset, the lifeblood of their company, which is their customer, and then their employees as well, which is the heart, right? And so I think it's super, super critical that you do that. That doesn't mean you can't innovate. It doesn't mean you can't sandbox stuff and you can't try stuff out. But you have to be very thoughtful, not only about the real impact of that from an ethics standpoint, but the perceived impact. Because oftentimes, when it comes to ethics, the perceived impact is actually more damaging than the real impact. And so I think you, as a leader, as a creator, as an engineer, whatever your role is, you have to be very thoughtful about those types of things and be very intentional about how you're going to use AI. In what I always tell leaders is find 3 ways to use it and then test those 3 ways. Don't try to do more than 3. Don't try to do 10. Just do 3. Test those 3. Okay, one of them works really well, the other 2 doesn't. Can the 2, keep the 1, now test another one, and then figure out how does it, if you think about as a big ship, is, if you've been inside of like a cruise ship or a large ship, it's a system, right? It's a system that's embodied inside of a structure. And so that system has to work really well for the ship to run. So how is, in those 3 things, like how is AI going to help your systems run, faster, better, cheaper, for your customers, right? So forth. So if you're using AI and it breaks a system, you want to be able to pull that back and repair it really fast. You don't want to have the tech debt of, the back half of the ship, we invested in AI 5 years ago. We don't know what's going on back there, but it keeps running. Occasionally it doesn't, and we don't know why, but we don't know anybody knows how to do it, right? That's tech. So then eventually you just have to go into port, shave the back half of the ship off and rebuild it. And then you've lost 5 years of revenue, right?
Yeah, 100% with you. When I was doing a little research on you before you came on the podcast today, another thing that stood out for me was your position on blame culture. And I know you advise leaders to be slow to blame, but eager to understand. So I'm curious, how does that principle extend to dealing with things like customer complaints and feedback, etc.? How do you turn negative experiences into opportunities for growth and learning? Is there anything you can share around that?
So I might get a little zen here for a second.
Yeah.
But my Zen master, as it were, when he and I talk about energy, oftentimes we will talk about positive energy, what people perceive as negative energy, and then energy that is kind of indifferent. And you as a human have the power to turn indifferent and negative energy into positive energy on your own. Like nobody controls that energy inside of you. You control that energy. And so when in an office space, when you're interfaced with negative energy or indifferent energy, and that could come in the form of, people aren't doing their job, people are performing well, that outcome wasn't what you expected it to be, all those different things. I think you as a leader have a choice on how you respond to that and how you help and nurture that back to success. And I think this goes back to psychological safety as well. And so I think it's really important that people see your authentic energy when you come and you embrace big challenges. And so I think it's important for you to understand like how to encourage and how to strengthen people without having them feel negative energy coming from you, because some people aren't as capable of managing their energy levels. And so you have to be very thoughtful, especially junior people in your organization that are still learning about themselves as a human being in their 20s. They may not be as capable of managing their energy levels and different things. So then you parlay over to the customer. And I think generally speaking, there's this old adage, the customer is always right. I think it's an interesting one. I don't disagree with it, but I don't agree with it. From my perspective, I think the customer decided to buy your product because they loved your product. And so it's less about them being right, and it's more about getting them back to enjoying the product that they loved the first time. If a customer loves your product each and every day that they use it, then you're going to create emotional affinity with that product. So essentially, that product's going to become like their Starbucks coffee, right? Or their Costa coffee, or wherever they get coffee, right? And so every day they're going to see a need, an emotional need that they have to engage with that product on a daily basis. So I think when a customer comes and they have a problem or a frustration, you have to think about, well, how do I turn that problem or frustration back into love? And what do I need to do, as a person who's engaging with it? What do I need to do as a leader that's creating, the incentive models, the processes, what we can do and can't do for customers, all that kind of stuff, right? How do you transition it back to love? Because at the end of the day, you want that energy for your product, because then the longevity of your product is going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And that's kind of the way that I kind of think about it from an energy standpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah. If I look back to my own IT days, I did see examples of departments wanting the next shiny tech solution and then paying for it by reducing headcount. It always baffled me, because I think it's always been about that human tech balance and the two working almost symbiotically together to deliver better results. That's where the magic happens. And I think here in 2023, that's more important than ever before, especially with the advent of virtual solutions and AI. So I've got to ask, how do you find that right balance between automated and human interactions in customer service? And are there any metrics that you use to gauge this balance? Because I think this is something that we don't talk about enough sometimes.
So I think there's two interesting topics. I think one is, so earlier in my career, I managed a customer service team on the East Coast of America. And when I went there, they had 200 people, customer service. And we introduced two things. We introduced some tech solutions. We introduced some outsourcing. And I think everybody was afraid that, we were going to let go of those 200 people's jobs. And I said, no, that's not what we're doing. I said, what we need to do is, you guys have been doing this for 5, 10, 15 years, right? We need to have you do more valuable stuff. Like tech and outsourcing should do the repeatable, less valuable tasks. Because this was 2005, right?
Yeah.
So tech, it was more outsourcing with a little bit of tech, right? And so I think when you think about your strategy, don't jump over dimes to get to pennies, or don't jump over pounds to get to pence, right? You need to think about what's the value proposition that you're giving your customers and your people, and how can you maximize, those people, those 200 people in this example, to bring that love to your customers while you're maximizing technology, AI, outsourcing to do other tasks that maybe aren't as valuable or front-facing to your customers, right? So I think it's really important for any leader to think about the balance of, how you resource, where you resource, whether it's technology, whether it's in-house, whether it's out-house. I think that's super important. From a metrics standpoint, for me, it's really simple, and people don't do this, and I don't know why they should, is any experience that is touched by technology, that is touched by outsourcing, or is touched by insourcing, should have the same metric. And what I mean by this is oftentimes a simple metric like customer satisfaction it is an easy metric for you to say, okay, well, how is customer satisfaction when the technology touches it, when the AI handles it? How is it when the internal team touches it? How is it when the external team touches it? And that gives you the immediate gauge of customer perception. And that's what's most important when it comes to, do they love your product? Are they going to be sticky? And so most companies, when they use technology or AI, they often just don't manage it. Like they don't measure it. They just do it. And they're like, oh, I just saved $2 million. So it doesn't matter. And so I think it's super important that, use AI, but send a survey out for the solution. Like, was the customer happy? And I think what you'll find is like in an AI solution, so I've done this, right? So the AI solutions that didn't work very well, they were delivering like 29, 35% CSAT. So we killed them because that's like 1 in every 3 of your customers is in love and the other 2 are ostensibly in hate, right? And so the AI solutions that work really well either manage to keep par with the internal or just below, or they beat, because the issues ostensibly are easier, right? So the satisfaction is easier to achieve than the harder issues. And so I think as a leader, you have to be very thoughtful. Anytime you use technology, how are you measuring customer perception and customer reality? The metric is up to you. But I think that's really important.
And again, so refreshing to hear you say that. And given your extensive experience, are there any other emerging trends in customer experience that maybe business leaders should be mindful of? Because a lot of are still trying to get to grips with the fact that they were blindsided by Gen AI for the first 6 months of the year. So anything else they should be mindful of? And what do you think the most disruptive changes in the next 3 to 5 years will be? Which again is a huge question, saying Gen AI did so much in just 6 months. But is there anything that you see on the horizon that excites you?
Well, I think what's going to be interesting, so I think Gen AI will be interesting for a number of different reasons. So I want to double click into that because I don't even think we've touched the surface of what's going to happen in that space. So I think one thing about Gen AI is obviously, how do you leverage it to optimize and improve your overall customer experience? So what people aren't talking about is how do you use Gen AI to optimize and improve your employee and your agent experience? And so like, for example, today, I've been using Gen AI for a number of years, as I mentioned earlier, but 30% of my job as an executive is what I use Gen AI for. And so Microsoft has an interesting product called Copilot. And this isn't an advert for that, but this is just an example, is that more products are going to come out where you're going to be able to have a Copilot next to you that will help you as an employee to do your job better and faster. And it's going to enable you to be more successful. And I think the leaders and the individuals that embrace that are going to be the folks that they're going to appear to be miles ahead of everybody else, but they're not really miles ahead of everybody else. They're just using Gen AI to leverage and to optimize their experience. And so I think people should really be recognized. In my opinion, any CX leader that isn't talking about Gen AI and how they use it in their own job is not going to be a CX leader for any of the top tier companies in the next 5 or 10 years, because you're going to have to be able to understand not only how to use it in the customer side, but also on the employee side, because there's so much optimization. We did a pilot, and what we found is by introducing Gen AI inside of the employee base, within 3 months, we improved productivity by 10%. We didn't let go of anybody. We just improved their productivity by so then we're getting 10% more productivity. So we're operating better, more seamlessly and faster, for our customers and delivering more value proposition. So I think that's the second part of Gen AI I wanted to double click. I think that's important that a lot of leaders aren't paying attention to. The next thing that I think that has existed for the past couple of years in fledgling mode, and I've implemented it in the consulting part of my business for a number of clients, but I think Gen AI will give this ability to everybody, is the ability to, on a day-to-day, track customer stickiness with customer engagement. And what I mean by that is it took a lot of work in the past to do this, where you connected let's say a gaming database with a gaming CRM, with a gaming community software. You brought them all together. You would use Tableau to look at it kind of on a daily or weekly basis on what was going on, using a unique ID to see what's happening, like how often is the player playing, when does the player stop, how sticky is the player, when do they submit tickets, when are they writing things online that are frustrating or positive sentiment. Like, we were able to track all that, but it was an intense amount of work to get there. But you get there and then you create profitability, because then you make business decisions that will drive the right behaviors in the game. But I think with Gen AI, you're going to be able to, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger size that, right? From me to him, you're going to be able to kind of, okay, it used to be an axe and now it's a chainsaw. That's what my buddy told me. And so I think that's what we're going to go when it comes to being able it's going to be daily stickiness, daily response, daily reaction to the customers and players, rather than whenever they submit a ticket in, or rather than weekly or monthly. And so I think that we've finally caught up to the ability to help with the eyeball problem, which is they're moving their eyeballs between the apps, the games, and other things. So now we have data, we have technology, and we have engagement intertwined in such a way that we can actually help keep their eyeballs focused on what they originally loved, which was our product. And so I think that's the second thing that I focus on. I think the last one, which I don't think is super innovative, but I just don't think people are doing it. It's been around for a long time, but it's persona mapping and customer journeys. Yeah. And it's still not enough companies are doing it, where you normally have 7 to 8 buyer personas, but you still develop a CX experience as if they're all the same, and they're not. And so you need to figure out, like, well, how do I build out my personas? How do I build out the customer journey for those personas? Because it's way different. Like me as a buyer versus you as a buyer, we're probably not the same persona. And so then how do I then develop a CX strategy that engages those personas as if it's a fully customized experience? And so I think that's the third area that people really should focus on.
Wow, such a thought-provoking moment to end on. I suspect we've set off a lot of light bulb moments around the world as business leaders listening to this conversation. And as a little thank you, I want to see if there's something we can do for you here before I let you go, because some of the biggest names in business, VC, funding and tech have either been guests on here or maybe they listen to this podcast. So is there a person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, and why? Because he or she might just be listening to this, but let's see what we can manifest together. Who would that person be?
I love the question. I'll give my original answer, and then I'll give my second answer, because my original answer, he's probably watching it from somewhere, but he's not alive. Nelson Mandela is like my original answer. He's one of my heroes. He has this phrase that I love. I never lose. I only win or learn.
Yeah.
And so the breadth of experiences that he had in his life that were both immensely difficult and immensely patient, and then immensely successful at the human level and obviously governmental level. I'd love to have lunch with him. I probably can't have lunch with him. Maybe his energy will be around me someday. That'd be awesome. But I think at a huge, like somebody that's alive today, I think it would be super interesting to sit down and have lunch with the CEO of Microsoft right now. And I say that because if you look at where he came from, he grew up in India. He went from those kind of humble beginnings to managing one of the largest, at times the largest tech company in the world. Understanding that journey of experience, what he overcame, what he decided to focus on, how he turned Microsoft into where it is today. He really revolutionized and transformed Microsoft, because I worked back at Microsoft and it was a good company when I worked at it, but he's really transformed it into a super competitive company for the next decade. And so I think it's obviously not just him. There's a leadership team around him, but he sets the vision. So understanding what his life vision is for himself, and then also what his business vision is, I think could be super interesting for me to learn as a leader, as someone that has run companies on a much smaller scale, but has run companies and, is building his own life. It's his own life architect. So I think that could be a fun lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll throw that out into the universe. Let's see what we can manifest together. And before I let you go, for anyone listening just wanting to find out more information about the work you're doing, about Arise, contact you or your team, etc., where would you like to point everyone listening?
So I think I have a website, chiefcxofficer.com. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. And if you enjoy videos, you can find me on TikTok, Insta, and YouTube. It's all the same at Chief CX Officer alias. So you can pretty much anywhere in the world that Chief CX Officer, I own it. So you can find me there.
Oh, awesome. I'll be checking those channels out myself too. And have you gone down on TikTok? Are you a hit with the kids?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of folks think that it's only teenagers that are watching TikTok, but there's an amazing amount of business people that watch TikTok. So I have to look at my latest numbers, but I think I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 followers.
Wow.
And it's just business people are on there. It's a platform for everyone, I think. It tends to be more popular with the younger crowd, but it's starting to expand. And so it's kind of Instagram's a really great platform for business too.
Awesome. I'll put links to all of those so people can find you nice and easy. And yes, we've talked about a lot of the big aspects of tech, such as AI and the ethical use of AI. But I think it was also fantastic to learn more about how you ensure a team feels psychologically safe, being genuine, and also moving away from blame culture. I think everyone's experienced that at some point. And just so many big talking points around balancing technology and the customer experience and how AI is transforming the whole CX industry. So many big talking points, but just thank you for bringing the topic to life today. I really appreciate your time for sitting down and talking with me.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. It's wonderful. And thanks for your listeners. Really appreciate the time and the opportunity to share just a little bit of my experiences.
So a huge thank you to Jonathan. I think through our conversation today, we've navigated that intricate lens of leadership priorities, including the need for psychological safety, authentic dialogue, and an empathetic approach to problem solving. I cannot thank Jonathan enough for sharing his wisdom on how technology, specifically AI, is not just a disruptor, but it is an enabler, which is enhancing customer experiences. And we've talked about the importance of striking the right balance between automation and the human touch without losing sight of ethical operations. I think it's so important. And that's something we've always tried to do here on Tech Talks Daily, demystify complex issues and ultimately offer a bit of actionable advice that has both immediate and long-term business value. And for me, our talk today highlighted not just the challenges, but the myriad of opportunities that come with aligning technology, ethical considerations, and above all, human emotions and needs. So thank you, Jonathan, for gracing our show with your wisdom and insights. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We will continue to navigate the ever-changing landscape of tech and leadership. And let's not forget the wise words of Jonathan too. Be slow to blame, but eager to understand. So a big thank you to everybody listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.